She said my name like it was a secret she wasn't supposed to know. Soft, deliberate, like she was testing how it felt on her tongue. I hadn't planned to stay after class. The others had already left, the echo of their footsteps fading down the hall, leaving just the sound of chalk dust settling and her breathing, calm and measured, behind me. The late afternoon light bent through the high windows, casting long gold lines across the floor. It felt too still. Too close. She stood by the desk, gathering papers that didn't really need gathering, movements too slow to be casual. Her wrists brushed against the sleeve of her white blouse, and I watched the faint tremor of her fingers as if they were saying something she wouldn't. "Still here?" she asked. Her voice had that low, steady warmth that could turn even the simplest words into something dangerous. "I was going to ask about the essay," I said, but my voice caught halfway through the sentence. It sounded like an excuse, and maybe it was. She looked up then. Her eyes, steady, dark, unreadable, stayed on me a second too long. I should have looked away. I didn't. "You always look like you're about to say something," she said quietly, half smiling. "Then you stop. I don't want to say the wrong thing." "There isn't a wrong thing," she said, but her tone betrayed her, a hint of hesitation, the faintest pause before the word wrong. The clock ticked. The air hummed with the faint scent of coffee and paper. I could hear her footsteps as she walked closer, measured, deliberate. When she reached the desk beside mine, her hand rested against it, inches from where I sat. "You work too hard," she murmured. Her perfume wasn't strong, but it lingered, subtle, floral, like rain on skin. I could feel it more than smell it. The space between us tightened. My chest did too. "I like your class," I said, though what I meant was, I like the way you look at me when you think no one's watching. She tilted her head, studying me. "You always say that as if you're apologizing for it." "I just don't want it to sound like what?" she asked softly. The question hung there, sharp and quiet. I didn't answer. She didn't press. But her hand moved, not toward me, not away, just a small, indecisive motion, the kind that means I shouldn't and I want to at the same time. Outside, a bell rang somewhere, faint and distant. Neither of us moved. Her gaze dropped, to the table, then to my hand resting on it. She didn't touch it, but the air between our skin felt charged, like static before lightning. "Your eyes," she said finally, barely audible, "make me forget every rule I ever made for myself." The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded like they escaped her. I think she regretted them the instant they left her mouth. Her lips parted slightly, as if to take them back, but it was too late. The room was already full of their echo, her confession hanging between us, warm and alive. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, the door handle rattled. Her eyes flicked toward it, panic flashing through composure. A voice called from the hall, casual and close. "Professor? You still in there?" She straightened too quickly, gathering her papers again, her movements all wrong now, sharp, defensive. "Go," she whispered under her breath, not looking at me. I hesitated. "No," she said softer, but with the kind of urgency that left no room for argument. As I left, I caught one last glimpse, her hand pressed flat to the desk, head bowed, breath caught in her throat. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next time I saw her, it was raining. The kind of slow, unhurried rain that makes everything quieter. I'd stayed behind again, no reason this time, at least none I could say out loud. She was at her desk, hair slightly damp from her walk-in, a few strands clinging to her cheek. She didn't look up when I entered, but I caught the faintest curve at the corner of her lips, not a smile, exactly. More like recognition. "Back so soon?" she asked, eyes still on her notes. "Couldn't finish the essay," I said. It was half true. "You're not the only one," she murmured. Her tone carried something heavier than humor, something that hung in the quiet between us. For a moment I thought about turning back, but the air in that room always did something to me, like I couldn't breathe right anywhere else. She finally looked up. The circles under her eyes were faint but there, and I wondered if she ever slept properly. There was a wedding band on her hand once, a tan line still faintly visible, though the ring itself was gone. I used to think teaching would keep me busy enough not to think about other things, she said absently, flipping a page that didn't need flipping. What kind of things? She paused, not offended, just surprised I'd asked. Then she smiled faintly, eyes soft but distant. People who leave before you're ready. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing. The rain filled the silence for us. She stood and crossed the room, her steps unhurried, the faint sound of her heels muffled by the carpet. She stopped beside my chair and leaned over to glance at the paper I hadn't really written. The scent of her shampoo, clean, faintly citrus, caught me off guard. Her sleeve brushed my arm. I didn't move. Neither did she. You don't hide things well, she said quietly. I'm not trying to, I whispered before I could stop myself. That made her glance at me, properly this time. The space between us shrank to nothing. Her breath touched my jaw, warm and too close. She hesitated, her fingers resting lightly on the back of my chair. You should, she said, voice softer now. It's safer. Is it? Her answer was a long silence. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. She straightened instantly, the mask sliding back into place. Her tone, when she spoke again, was steady, professional even. You're too young to understand how quickly people talk, she said, turning back toward her desk. I'm not a kid, I said quietly. That stopped her mid-step. She didn't turn, but I saw her shoulders tense. No, she said at last. You're not. Her voice wavered barely. Then she took a slow breath, steadying herself. When she finally turned back, the warmth was gone from her face, replaced by something else. Not rejection, but surrender. The kind that happens when you already know you'll give in eventually. She reached for the paper in my hand, fingers grazing mine. The touch was brief, a flicker, a heartbeat, but it burned longer than it should have. Bring me the rest tomorrow, she said softly. I nodded, though I didn't hear half the words. As I left, I could still feel her touch on my skin, a ghost of something neither of us dared to name. And for the first time, I knew I'd come back, not for the essay, but for her. It happened outside of class. I saw her through the cafe window before she saw me, sitting alone, hair undone, a book half open in her hands but her eyes unfocused. She looked younger like that, softer, as if the armor she wore at work had slipped for a moment. I could have kept walking. I didn't. When I stepped inside, the bell over the door chimed, and her gaze lifted. For a second, surprise flickered across her face, followed by something else, something she didn't bother hiding. You shouldn't be here, she said when I approached. I didn't know you would be. But now you do. She gestured toward the empty chair across from her. Sit then. Her voice carried a quiet defiance, as if she'd stopped pretending this didn't matter. The rain outside streaked the windows, turning the world beyond them into blurred motion. Between us, a single candle flickered, throwing gold across her skin. You've been avoiding me, I said. Trying to, she corrected, a small, humorless smile on her lips. Why? Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Because I keep forgetting who I'm supposed to be when I'm around you. I swallowed, leaning closer. Maybe you don't have to be anyone. She looked up sharply, eyes glinting. You think it's that simple? No, I said. That's why I'm still here. Something cracked in her then, a visible shift. Her shoulders eased, her breath slowed. She looked at me the way she used to before she remembered she shouldn't. You're too young to carry this kind of weight, she whispered. Then stop giving it to me. The words landed harder than I meant them to. She blinked, startled, and then she laughed. Softly. Sadly. I used to think I had control over everything, she said. Over what I said, what I wanted. But you... Her voice broke off as I reached across the table, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Her breath hitched, her body stilling. Me what? I asked. Her lips parted, but no words came. The cafe around us blurred into background noise, spoons clinking, rain whispering against glass. All I could see was her, the slight tremor in her hands, the pulse at her throat, the way she leaned forward ever so slightly, like gravity had made its choice. Her fingers brushed mine. Once. Then again, slower this time. This is wrong, she breathed. I know. And yet, her voice faded as she stood, close enough that the warmth of her body touched mine. I rose too, the table forgotten. The space between us vanished until there was only the sound of our unsteady breathing. Tell me to stop, I whispered. She closed her eyes. I can't. Her hand came to rest on my chest, tentative, trembling. My own lifted to her jaw, thumb tracing the edge of her skin. She leaned into the touch like it was the first honest thing either of us had done in weeks. Then a flash of movement by the door. Someone entering. Her name called out, friendly, unsuspecting. She froze. Our hands fell away as if burned. She turned toward the voice, her composure fracturing just enough for me to see the panic beneath. Don't, she whispered, not looking at me. Not here. But her eyes, when they met mine again, said everything her voice couldn't. And in that suspended breath between what almost happened and what couldn't, something irreversible had already begun. The silence between us stretched for days after the cafe. She didn't show up to class for 2 of them. A substitute took her place, reading from notes that sounded hollow without her voice. When she finally returned, she looked composed again, hair tied neatly, voice steady, every movement deliberate. But something in her eyes had changed. They no longer met mine. I waited after class, though she'd stopped asking me to. She gathered her things quickly, avoiding conversation until I said, You weren't sick. Her hands froze mid-motion. No, she said quietly. Then where were you? Trying to remember who I was before all this. The words landed like glass breaking in slow motion. I wanted to ask what this meant, but I already knew. Before I could answer, a knock came at the open door. Another faculty member leaned in, a man in his 30s, familiar in the way people you don't want to know are. He smiled at her. Staff meeting got moved to 4, in case you didn't see the email. She nodded. Thanks, Daniel. When he left, I caught the shift, the faint exhale, the tremor in her hand. Who is he? I asked before I could stop myself. Someone who used to know me. Her tone was flat, but her throat tightened around the words. Used to? Don't. She turned away, voice fraying at the edges. It doesn't matter. But it did. The way she avoided his gaze in the hall, the way he lingered near her office door. It mattered too much. I followed her to the corridor, my pulse too loud. Did something happen between you two? She stopped walking. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she turned, eyes sharp. You don't get to ask me that. I'm not asking as a student. That's exactly what you are. She snapped, too quickly, too harsh. The sound of it cracked through the air. We stood there, too close, the hallway empty except for us. She was shaking, barely, but enough that I could see it. He told me, I said, quieter now, that you left before he was ready. Her eyes widened, stunned. Then, disbelief. He talked to you? I nodded once. He said he didn't understand why you disappeared. She stepped back, hand against the wall for balance. He shouldn't have said that. Because it's true? Her breath came shallow now, chest rising fast. Because you weren't supposed to know. I moved closer, too close, and she didn't retreat. The distance between us was measured in inches, in heartbeats. Why does it matter what I know? I asked. Because you make it harder to keep my promises. Her voice broke. Her hand brushed mine, not a touch, just the ghost of one. I caught it. Just lightly. Then stop keeping them, I said. She looked at me, truly looked, her expression shifting from fear to something dangerously close to surrender. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear. If I stop, I won't be able to stop at all. The air between us pulsed with everything that couldn't be undone. Outside, a storm gathered, thunder distant but growing. And in that moment I knew something had shifted. Whatever came next wouldn't wait much longer. It happened on the last evening of the semester. The building was almost empty, hallways washed in low amber light, the kind that makes every sound louder, every heartbeat sharper. She stood by the window of her classroom, arms folded, staring out at the rain. Again the rain, as if the world refused to let us have a clear sky. I didn't knock. She didn't turn when I entered. You shouldn't be here, she said, the words barely carrying. I've heard that before. She exhaled, shaking her head, eyes still fixed on the storm outside. You don't understand what this costs. Then explain it, I said. Because I've been trying to respect lines that don't even exist when we're in the same room. That made her look at me, really look, eyes dark with exhaustion and something deeper. You think this is easy for me? No, I said softly. I think you're terrified. Her silence confirmed it. The way she gripped the windowsill, the tension in her shoulders, she was fighting herself more than me. I took a step closer. Then another. You keep saying we shouldn't, I whispered. But you never say you don't want to. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I reached out, slowly, and brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. Her breath itched, her body going perfectly still. She didn't step back. You don't get to do that, she said, her voice trembling. I already did. For a heartbeat, either of us moved. The storm outside cracked with thunder, echoing through the room. She turned toward me, her face inches from mine now. Her breath touched my chin. If I cross this line, she whispered, there's no going back. Then maybe, I said, we stop pretending there's a line at all. Something in her broke then, not completely, but enough. Her hand came up to my chest, fingers curling in the fabric of my shirt, holding me there as if she hated herself for wanting to. Say it, I murmured. Her eyes searched mine, wild, desperate, uncertain. You already know. The words were barely audible, lost almost completely under the rain. I leaned closer, our foreheads nearly touching. I want to hear it. She closed her eyes, and for a long moment, the only sound was her breathing, shallow, uneven, real. I want you, she said, the words breaking like glass in her throat. Silence. Then lightning filled the room. Neither of us moved to close the distance. We didn't need to. The air between us did it for us, thick, trembling, alive. Then, as quickly as it came, she stepped back. Her hand fell away. You have your whole life ahead of you, she said, barely managing the words. Don't spend it waiting for someone who can't be what you need. But you are, I said. She shook her head, once, hard, then smiled, fragile and resigned. Maybe for a moment. The rain softened, the storm easing as if the world itself was catching its breath. I wanted to stop her, to ask her to stay, but there was nothing left to say. We both made our choice. As she walked past me, her fingers brushed mine, a silent goodbye wrapped in the warmth of everything we couldn't keep. And though she never looked back, I understood. Some rules aren't meant to be broken. Some are meant to be remembered forever. The evening air was warm, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and rain-soaked pavement. She stood by the open window, light falling across her face in soft, gold streaks. For a moment I just watched her, the same woman who once kept her distance, now looking at me with no walls left between us. I used to think, she said quietly, that what we felt couldn't survive outside the moments we stole. I moved closer, every step deliberate, as if crossing the invisible line that had always existed between us. And now? I asked. She smiled faintly, a mix of courage and tenderness. Now I'm not sure it needs to hide anymore. There was something in her voice, the tremor of fear, but also the acceptance that comes after you've fought long enough to stop pretending. I reached out, my fingers brushing hers. She didn't move away this time. Instead, her hand turned toward mine, fitting perfectly, naturally, like it had always been meant to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of the things we hadn't said, of every look that had meant too much, of every rule we'd silently broken. "You're still afraid," I whispered. Her eyes softened. "Of what people will think, maybe. Of losing myself again." "You haven't," I said. "You found something real." We both did. For a heartbeat, she just stared at me, eyes glimmering, lips parted, that same poised calm she wore even when her heart was racing. Then she stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. The world seemed to quiet itself, the hum of the city fading into nothing. Her fingers rose to trace the edge of my jaw, slow, deliberate, like she was memorizing the moment. "I spent years teaching people to follow rules," she said softly. "Maybe it's time I learned how to break one for myself." I laughed quietly, though my chest felt too full to breathe. "Then let's make it a good one." Her forehead came to rest against mine, a simple touch that said everything words couldn't. The tension, the doubt, the ache of waiting, all of it dissolved into the quiet rhythm of our shared breath. Her hand tightened in mine. My thumb brushed against her wrist, feeling the quick pulse beneath her skin, real, fragile, alive. When she finally spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "I don't know what happens next." "Neither do I," I said. "But I know I want to find out, with you." She smiled, the kind that starts small and spreads like sunrise. Then she leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead, a promise, not a question. Outside, the rain began again, light and steady. We stood there, side by the window, fingers still intertwined, hearts finally steady after so much noise. And for once, it didn't feel like breaking a rule. It felt like finally coming home.